This is something I never thought I would say to open up a video or a podcast, but by clicking on this video or clicking on this podcast, if you're listening on Spotify, you are about to listen to a conversation that I recorded with Rowdy Gaines. Rowdy Gaines is the voice of swimming, as some people would say. I think it's definitely something that I would say. He commentates the Olympics. He commentates pretty much any big event in swimming. You get to hear his voice online, on TV, wherever you're watching. He's the voice of swimming, and he was also, safe to say, a pretty good swimmer back in his day. But this is a conversation that I never really expected to be able to have. I never expected to have a podcast. So I appreciate you clicking on this and taking the time to listen to this conversation that I had with one of the, I think, the GOATs of our sport. GOAT, greatest of all time, greatest commentator of all time, the GCOAT. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way. I'm going to let y'all listen. Thanks for clicking on the video or listening on Spotify. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button, drop a comment. Let me know what you think of certain parts of this podcast. If you are on Spotify, I don't know, review the podcast. I'm not even really sure what you do at this point, but I'm going to get out of the way. Like I promised, enjoy the podcast and enjoy my conversation with the GOAT of commentary, the GCOAT, Rowdy Gaines. This is an interesting moment for me because as a kid, I grew up on, I want to say, your prime time of commentary, which was '08. And I remember being in my living room listening to you and Dan Hicks just kind of going back and forth. And it was a big moment for the sport. And you kind of got to put your voice on it, whether you like to, take any of the credit or not. You are a large part of that piece of history in the sport. And so I do want to talk a lot about commentary. And just kind of, selfishly, I want to hear from your perspective a lot of like the things that you do, how you feel about it. I've gotten to do a little bit of commentary. I got to do some really low level commentary, luckily, some solo commentary, which is, I think, outside of some of the really big production stuff, the most difficult job in the world is talking to yourself for the internet. But give me just kind of like a high level view, or you can go as like drilled down as you want to. What's like a day in the life of an Olympic commentary day like?
Well, Kyle, first of all, you have done so much for the sport of swimming in this short span of time. I think everybody in the swim world knows who you are now, and I think that is a real testament to your stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word,
It can
in the
be.
fact that, man, you just hammer it home. You work your butt off, and I think doing something like that, getting to your question, is going to really pay off for you in the end. You're still young, man. How old are you?
29.
Yeah, dude. I didn't even start until my first Olympics was in 1992. So I would have been 33 years old. So, but a day in the life, you've gotten a taste of it, so you kind of know a little bit about that world. It's not digging ditches, it's not rocket science. I get it, but it is stressful. A day in the life at the Olympics is completely different than a day in the life of a tier pro swim. A day in the life at the Olympic Games is literally 18, 20 hours a day at the pool for 9 straight days. And, there's very little time to rest, and it's a lot of work. Again, like I said, it's not digging ditches, but when I'm on the broadcast, for example, I literally have sometimes 3 or 4 people talking to my ear, sometimes at the same time. That because you have your producer talking to you, but you also have your play-by-play guy, obviously, and you also have your director, and you also have, for me, it's my Holly Hunter, and again, going back to movies, in that movie Broadcast News, my Holly Hunter is Mike Unger, who has been with me for so many Olympic Games and helping me find some tidbits about things that I might have missed, or I might have made a mistake on, and I make plenty of those. But a typical day, it's a little different, like I said, at the Olympics, because we're doing prelims, and when you do prelims, it makes for a long day. But it's production meetings in the morning before prelims. Again, the Olympics were turned around in Tokyo, but on a normal Olympics production meeting in the mornings at say 6 a.m., we have a 9 o'clock start for prelims. We go till noon. We come back and do a little bit of post production, and then Dan and I usually take a nap on a piece of cardboard in an edit room somewhere for like an hour or two. And then we started all over again around 4 o'clock for 7 o'clock finals that last until 10 or 11, and then do the same thing post production and try to get back to the hotel for a few hours sleep and do it all over again for 9 straight days or 8 straight days. Now it's going to be 9.
Yeah, long day and long more than a week, to say the least. I think one thing that people don't really understand is how overstimulating that environment is. And luckily, if you have a good co-host, and luckily, I like to say that I kind of like forget. And I know I'm having a good session if I forget that I'm wearing headphones and I forget that there's a mic in front of me, and just kind of enter that flow state. But at the same time, I mean, when you're trying to finish a thought into a microphone and people at home are just listening to you as if you're saying a regular sentence, and then all of a sudden you've got two people jumping into your ears, and all of a sudden they're trying to take you out of a break or into a break, or have you do some sort of read or promo the next, move you along. And that's necessary for sure, because if you're a diehard swimming fan, it's so easy to get stuck talking about one thing for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The event catalog is going to go on whether you like it or not. So sitting at home, I think you don't really realize how, and in my first day of doing an ESPN commentary session, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And then within, I think I've told this story before. It was the first day of Big 12s where you just do the 200 medley relay, diving, and then the 800 freestyle relay, or in some order of that kind.
Right.
And there wasn't really, and relays are difficult to do, especially play by play. I kind of compare it to horse racing. You're just kind of like, or auctioneering, you're ripping through names. You're just trying to get everyone's name in and kind of tell a little bit of the story. I remember taking that headset off and thinking, I don't think I can do this for one more day, not even 3 more days. It's an exhausting thing. It's really overstimulating. Yeah. But if you had to pick like one thing out of commentary, you've been doing it for a while now, you've done it on the biggest stage, and you've done it on, some lower level stages as well. So you have kind of the entire, front to back of commentary, somewhere you get to probably kind of lean back a little bit and just be more of, who you would be talking to me. And also you've done the Olympics where you're talking to millions of people who don't know every tiny detail of the sport. What would you say the hardest thing about commentating is?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I think one of the most difficult things is, again, you're talking about two different types of broadcast. There's the Olympics and Olympic trials, because that's live every night on NBC, and everything else. Even the World Championships is pretty much everything else, because that audience is a swimming audience for the most part. We want, thanks to you, we want to try to get that word out and try to get other people to tune in, but primarily it's a swimming audience, especially for the homegrown tier pros and NCAAs. And you're not getting anybody watching those meets, unless they know a lot about swimming. The Olympics is completely opposite. You're going to have the swimmers, you're going to have the people that are in the know, but you're broadcasting to 20, 30 million people a night, and let's just make up a number 20 million. Well, 19,950,000 of those people don't know anything about swimming. So the hardest thing is in that audience, that Olympic audience, is to make sure you dumb it down, that you have to explain, what the starting blocks are. You have to explain what starting block means. Oh, that platform right there, what is that?
Right.
What is all the different colored lane lines mean? What are those flags in the pool? It's just like those kinds of things that we kind of take for granted. You really kind of have to start fresh. And that's hard because the Olympics is every 4 years. So you have to kind of relearn everything to dumb it down. Fortunately, I've done 8 or 9 of them. So I've gotten used to it a little bit. I think the hardest thing for me on the other side of the broadcast, Kyle, is really keeping up with all the different nuances of technique.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a lot to it, and I will tell you, and I'm sure most people, especially the trolls out there, who I don't read about, but I hear about every once in a while, will tell you that I don't know crap about swimming, and I probably don't know a quarter as much as somebody like that you that lives and breathes it every day, uh, or a Murph or a Ledecky or a Caleb or whatever. These guys, they know so much because they live and breathe it and do it every day. But nobody loves swimming more than I do. Nobody loves to watch a swim meet more than I do. I love to watch swimming. I could sit there and watch swim meets all day long. I'm so boring. Um, so nobody can deny my passion. So for me, one of the hard things is to make sure I have that passion in those day-to-day meets, that those tier pro meets in the middle of February that aren't very high on anybody's list to swim fast in, and try to create some sort of magic in each and every race. And it's not easy to do. Even though I believe in it, I still get excited about every race. I want everybody at home to get excited, and that's what I kind of pretend doing. I just pretend like I'm talking as almost all the time. I pretend like I'm talking to somebody that doesn't know anything about swimming.
There's so many things that people at home and people that haven't worn a headset and done like an entire meet before don't understand. And so that kind of leads me into my next question. I knew this was going to happen. I knew that, I wrote out questions and I did my research and everything, but I knew that, what are we, 15 minutes into it, I was going to have like 15 questions. Just like, this is more of a me personally, just getting to ask you, like, I'm not even going to post this actually. This is more me just getting to interview you. But I knew I was going to have like 15 questions piled up. But what is like one thing that you wish that people at home that were watching swimming, you can kind of pick your audience. It could be like a diehard swimming fan. You mentioned the trolls. I am a full-time Rowdy Gaines defender against the trolls because I think, I
Oh, you
have
don't
a
need to
little
be.
bit of
I'm
a
not worried
special.
about them.
Oh, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's one of my favorite jobs.
Well, thank you, but
Um,
it's not necessary. Thank you, though. That means a lot. Appreciate it, but I'm not worried about them.
That's a good outlook to have because they're easy to
Yeah.
let you consume you. But what is one thing that you wish, like, I know you don't think about them, they don't exist to you, but you wish that the trolls out there or the people that watch swimming and say Rowdy Gaines doesn't know what he's talking about, this and that. What is one thing you wish they knew about commentary and your job, which your job very well, but it's a difficult job to explain to people, especially because we're not talking about football that's got 16 games week after week after week. So like, what's one thing that you wish people at home knew about what you're doing in the commentary booth that they might not know when they're typing out a comment on SwimSwam or tweeting something?
Well, I do think that when they watch, I think a lot of people, especially the people in the know about the sport, watch it and say, what's he talking about? Missing the wall. There's got to be a better way to say it. He breathes to his right, whatever. You say that a million times. Dude, at the Olympic game, just think about the Olympics. I've called, let's see, I started in 92, 92, 96, 2004, 8, 12, 16, 20. I've called 8 games, right? Um, those 8 games, I've called about 1,500 races, right? So give or take. I was doing the math before I came on because I was just curious how many races and probably 1,200 of those have been with my partner Dan Hicks because we started together in '96. How many ways can you say streamline? There's only so many ways that you can say it, right? So a lot of it is I want people to understand there's only so many ways that I can be creative. And a lot of times it does sound repetitious, and it's not because I wanted to be. I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I should email it to you because it's probably pretty helpful. I've emailed it to a few people. I have a vocabulary list I have a vocabulary, Kyle, and literally the vocabulary are words and different ways to say things, you know.
Hmm.
And it's for backstroke, breast, and I do it for relays, starts, finishes, turns, you name it. And so I try to keep things as fresh as possible. But I just welcome, especially I would love any of the trolls. I don't know who they are. I don't read. I look at some articles on SwimSwim definitely the ones that help me, but I've never read the comment section. I just can't do it.
They're gnarly.
The good or bad, it doesn't matter to me because I just don't read them. Because I'm usually somewhere in the middle. To me, I'm not as bad as they say I am, and I'm not as good as they say I am. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. But there's a reason why NBC keeps hiring me for the Olympics. There's a reason why I'm doing the next two Olympic Games. Is I'm not sure I should have said that because it hasn't been announced yet.
We
But that's
can
all right.
snip it out.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I don't care. You're the first one to know.
There we go.
It's because they know that I love the sport and my passion comes through. But I invite those trolls to come to the booth, the ones that hate me the most. I'd love for them to come up to the booth. And next time I'm in your town and I'm in a pro swim in Knoxville, come on up and say, I'm one of those trolls that can't stand you. I want to see what this is all about. I'll have them sit right next to me, put the headset on, and listen to me call a few races. And then see if they have a little bit of a different opinion. Because I think walking a mile in my shoes, in our shoes, it gives you a completely different perspective than sitting at home because everybody's an armchair quarterback at home. You're watching an NFL football game. I watched the game last night. The Jets, and I love that game. And I watched it, and I was thinking, why didn't he say that? Even though I love Troy Aikman, I love Chris Collinsworth, I love Tony Romo, I love all of them. But you're always an armchair quarterback. It's just the way it is. That's what life is all about. Trolls now in this age that we live in, this day and age that we live in.
Yeah, and figuring out how to defend against them if you want to, or ignore them altogether. And I had a similar thought, and it's something that I wanted to bring up was I wish more than anything, anyone that ever says it's an easy job or says, this or that, I want to take it one step further. I want them to come up in the booth, put a headset on, call a race, and then have to listen back to it. Because my first day on a commentary set, a real one with a producer and a truck and everything, the whole first day in my ear, and I still appreciate this more than any advice I've ever gotten about anything in my entire life, was the first, I think probably the first race, whoever it was, I forget the exact producer's name, was, I can tell you've never done this. He told me in my ear, I can tell you've never done it on this level. You need to be more high energy than you think you're being right now and continue to play that in your head throughout the day. And over and over and over throughout that first day, I just kept hearing more energy, more energy, more energy. And then I went back to listen to that first race and I had to turn it off because it sounded like I was just talking to a fridge in my kitchen. And I mean, just monotone. And when you're in the moment, you feel like because I think you're kind of feeding off that energy. You think you're being really loud. You think you're being energetic, but really that energy is just kind of pouring into you. And so you're a little bit more down here. And so figuring out how to play that game and I can't even imagine having to do it when there's a big 4x100 freestyle relay, maybe, one that happened in 2008 going on. Granted, I think in that moment, it just kind of happens, but having to kind of match all of that at the same time, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's easy. It's not easy for sure. And you know more than anybody. And by the way, I've heard you on your calls at Big 12. You do Big 12, right?
Big 12. Mm-hmm.
And you're great. You're fantastic. I love your energy. You're awesome.
I appreciate it. I every year I try to. I think one of the hardest things to do is relax. Hardest thing to do is just relax. And luckily, after the first day, I think it just starts to get easier and easier. And luckily,
be yourself.
Yeah, just be yourself because you want to be the produced guy. You want to be and you grow up watching the news, right? You grow up watching all this stuff, and it's easy to try and be this person and not just be, the person, the reason that you were hired in the first place. But one of the things that I really want to know is the first time you did the Olympics, and then also we'll go all the way to like now, and then eventually we'll move on from Olympic commentary and commentary in general. Knowing how many people are watching the Olympics, the first time you did it, how nervous, if at all, were you, and how does it compare to standing behind the blocks for an Olympic final versus being up in the booth for the entire meet? You're calling. It's kind of like swimming every event in the program. You know how important it is for these athletes. So just tell me a little bit about how you kind of go into those events. And luckily, I think having swum in the Olympics and on, a very large world stage probably played into your favor, putting on the headset and having a little bit of that. But it is a very different type of pressure, I think, for me at least, because it's a voice and an opinion that is in your brain going into a microphone, and not necessarily like when you hit the wall and a number shows up. What you just did was physical, and that number is non-negotiable, right? Your voice and your opinions are who you are here and up here. And when people disagree with that, it's just like a different version of like, like, are they right? Am I wrong? Like, yeah, just tell me a little bit about pressure and how much you felt at the beginning. Has it like eased? Because 20 million, even if it's a hypothetical number, it's a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely compare the nerve to actually swimming in a big meet. I don't know about the Olympics, but the butterflies happen. You get nervous. You get a little negative in your mind. Oh my gosh, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to swim fast? This guy's going to beat me. What if I lose? I mean, all the kinds of things that happen naturally to us as athletes happens in the booth with me. And it started at the very first Olympics. The good thing about the first Olympics that I did, Kyle, was in 1992, as I said, in Barcelona. And in Barcelona, I called the triple cast, which you don't know of, but the triple cast was sort of ahead of its time. It had a red, white, and blue channel. And basically you could go, I did not do, it was an NBC broadcast, but it was not over the air. Mike O'Brien and Mary Waite actually did the broadcast in 92. I did the triple cast. And I loved it because I did every single race, prelims and finals. Everything was live. There was no going back and editing anything. And like you, after the first day, it wasn't a piece of cake, but it was much more relaxing. You get into a groove. It's that first 3 or 4 races, it's that first 25 of 100, that you're still, the adrenaline is flowing. But then once you flip at the turn, man, things just kind of take its natural course and those nerves go away and it's all about racing. And the same thing in the booth, it's all about just trying to do your homework, prepare, and then getting the job done in the booth. As we moved on, though, each and every Olympics was different, obviously. But each and every Olympics, I still felt those butterflies at the very beginning. And then once Dan and I, when we started together in 96, once Dan and I got into a group, because Dan doesn't call every meet, he'll do a world championships in between, he'll do the trials, but, we don't call that many meets together. He'll do Pan Packs every once in a while. I mean, we have worked together in between the Olympics. So it takes a little while to get used to your partner and the nuances. Now, after 8 Olympics, we've gotten used to each other, but, you definitely have the nerves, but you settle in after that first 3 or 4 races. And the good thing is we do prelims. I've done prelims since 96. So to do prelims and get those, I wouldn't say meaningless races, but get those preliminary races done helps a lot in kind of moving forward to the finals where, it's where it all counts.
Yeah, definitely. I'd much rather get to kind of knock the cobwebs off during a prelim race than, a 100 freestyle final that is going to live on YouTube forever now.
Right.
And so talking about, co-commentators and people that you've worked with, getting to work in media, I think I have a much elevated respect for, especially the people that do like NFL broadcasts. And I watch a lot of Pat McAfee and the way that he's just able to, I think, talk without seemingly, because, you don't really realize that when you just have, general conversation, you edit yourself and you kind of like jump back and forth and sometimes you'll get stuck. watching someone like that perform, knowing that cameras are on, and obviously over time you get better at it, it starts to become your new reality. You know, people like that just don't stumble over their words and are just able to flip from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and also maintain that level of excitement. The level of respect that I have for that type of personality, because it is, you are a personality, has just elevated so much, having done even just the small amount of stuff that I've done so far. So, in your experience, and if you have a story that's attached to it or anything like that, who is probably the most impressive media personality that you've worked with, from an ability to do a ton of different sports, an ability to just kind of like bring people in and out, because I do the play-by-play stuff and kind of flip over into the analyst role. And I wish more than anything I could just get rid of the play-by-play, because bringing in and out and going up and down and doing ad reads, I had to do my first promo ever last year at Big 12s, and it honestly felt like an entirely different world. But I don't know, maybe one or two, you don't have to pick just one. Who are some of the most impressive people that you've worked with over the years in NBC and ESPN, and what kind of set them apart?
Well, I mean, certainly for me, on the world's biggest stage, well, let me back up a second. There are two people that have shaped who I am and have helped mentor me to become this so-called broadcaster. I use that word loosely. It's John Neighbor, who I worked with in the beginning of my career, late 80s, early 90s. And he taught me pretty much every basic thing to know. So I owe John so much. And of course, Dan Hicks. Dan is, one of my best friends. He is, to me, the consummate professional, and has helped obviously mentor me too, as well, and helped me through so many different trials and tribulations of, screwing up here or there and keeping me calm when I need to stay calm, and just kind of holding my hand through each and every time we've ever broadcast together. He is truly, to me, the guy that is the gold standard. But I've worked, every person I've worked with, Kyle, has been awesome. And, I think for me that, if there's a Mount Rushmore of people I've worked with, Jason Knapp, who I do so many, especially the pro swims, I've done worlds with him. I mean, he's just the best. He's, again, a great, great friend, and somebody that you can just count on, to nail it every single time, to get that on camera right on target when he has to. And Ted Robinson, who I've worked with quite a bit. Those guys are the best. I love them so much. They've meant so much to me. And like you said, man, their job is so much harder than mine. Oh, I did play-by-play for NC2As last year, or was it year before? I can't remember. I've done 36 of them, so I forget. Ooh. But I hated it. Dude, man, I hated it. It's just so much more work, So I don't envy you doing play-by-play. But yeah, there's a lot to go into working together and working on the fly. One thing, that Dan is so good at, and it's helped me so much over the years, is, and I'll give you a quick example of Dan's professionalism, is at the Olympics. We have to go on the fly at the Olympics. There's a set time that this race goes on, but things happen. Mm-hmm. There's a DQ, there's a controversy, there's something happening back into the studio, and we're delayed. We have to flesh things out a little bit because they can't go back to the studio yet. And we'll be right before a race, and Tommy Roy, who's been our producer for the last 7 Olympics and the best producer in the business, along with Peter Lasser, tells us, okay, turn around, you're on camera in 10 seconds, 9, 8. And we don't know what we're saying on camera. You're on camera. And that's an example of, we're broadcasting to 20 million people, and you're broadcasting on camera with a 10-second notification, and Dan's a guy that can just dude, man, he just slides right in there and is smooth and silk. And it makes me relax and makes me better being on camera and talking about, whatever it is that he wants to talk about. So that's just an example of how good he is. And, I would say the same thing about anybody I've worked with, but Dan, especially because, uh, there's just always these huge surprises in the Olympic Games and Olympic trials.
Yeah, the 10-second on-camera countdown is one that I can relate to more than I would like to be able to. Oh, man, it is. You write out all this stuff, and I'll have a script for my open, and
Prepare it up, dude.
Oh, yeah, a couple minutes before show, they're like, all right, then we're going to throw you on camera right here. And I'm like, well, that happens.
You're prepared for, though.
But sometimes not. Sometimes it depends on how the prep.
The meet starts and everything. You're prepped for it. Those are the things that you hope to prep for and be prepared for. It's the surprise on cameras that really kind of like throw you for a loop.
Yeah, or when you're taping the open for a show and they're planning on playing it back, and you can, do 2 or 3 takes, and then you do 2 or 3 takes and you mess up because it's a long open, and then all of a sudden you're running up against the clock and they just go, we're doing it live. And I'm like, all right. And what's funny is actually normally I think there's something going on in your brain, because when we go live, I think 9 times out of 10, it's pretty much flawless. It's normally my best take, because I know that there's no other option. This is it. This is what's going to happen. And that's kind of like one thing that I think it's overlooked is, when you're live, you're live. It's over. It's done. Whatever you say is out there. It's gone forever. There's no editing. There's none of that. And that also, I mean, I like to say that I kind of like black out and I'm just in swimming. I'm just talking. Yeah. There's something in the back of my head at all times, though, that knows that we are live and there are people watching, and that whatever happens, happens. And it's not necessarily like I think I'm going to say something wrong or say something bad. It's
no doubt about it.
Once you realize the people that are swimming and their families, this is a moment for them. It's a huge moment for them. And then they rely on like your call, but there's like a moment for them, and you want to be able to give them that moment and make sure it's right. That piece of it too, it just kind of all lives back there. But oh man, the 10-second you're on camera thing, it's so funny because in the moment you're terrified, and then once you're on camera, everything just kind of
something clicks. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting.
I love live. You're right, Kyle, though. I love live much better than I do tape. And you're right, usually live, it's your best take. Now, if you end up having to do it live, I go, God dang, why didn't I do that on the dang 5 takes I messed up on before we had to go live, It's just weird.
I actually had a funny moment in that. So the specific scenario that I'm talking about is from this past Big 12s. We had this long open we were taping because it was on like day 2 where we were recapping day 1 and previewing day 2, which is your first like actual, event schedule. And there was one, I think it was the 100 breaststroke between Lydia Jacoby and Anna Ellen. And for some reason, I just had this like riff that came out where I said, if I had to put money on this race, I would just put the money back in my pocket because I have no idea who's going to win. And it was not rewritten. I had never said or thought that in my life. And it just kind of fell out. And I think it was live or it might have been taped, but into my headset came my producer and was like giving me props for it. And then I got excited because I was like, that was cool. People thought it was cool. And then I almost lost my train of thought. So I had to kind of like click back in. But that battle you've got with, ooh, I did something cool. But also if I sit on that for too long, I'm going to forget what I'm doing, 2 sentences from now. It's a weird thing. But talking about commentary and kind of moving into, I want to talk a little bit about NCAA swimming because we're getting into that season. I think one of my favorite calls of yours, outside of obviously the 2008 400 freestyle relay, which we can go into that and talk about it for an entire hour and a half episode, was...
Well, they did an hour and a half documentary on the dang thing. So
they did,
definitely.
And it deserved it. But one of my favorite calls of yours was actually Leon Marchand's 200 IM from NCAA's this most previous year, because I think your call at the 100 split kind of perfectly encapsulated everyone's thoughts on what they were watching this kid do. When at the 100 split, you saw, I think it was 44.0 come up, which is crazy to even think still is reasonable to expect someone to actually do, which he did. And I think your call was, is that right? And I don't know. I kind of want to just talk about, do you pre-write anything? Do you have things that you kind of want to pull out of your back pocket in a cool moment? Do you have like phrases that you have pre-written, or is it just all on the fly, whatever is coming out of Rowdy's head watching? Because you are, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with you being the person that loves swimming more than anybody else on the planet, which is a huge asset when you're calling a race like that. And also having the knowledge to be able to see at the 100 split, Leon's 44.0. How does that make any sense? It's an open like, and then now he's doing another 100, and I have to kind of like recollect myself. But is it all on the fly, or is there anything that you're like, on a random Tuesday in March, you're like, that could be a cool phrase that I might be able to sneak in and make it seem like it's seamless? Or is it pre-written, all on the fly? Is it a mix? What are we working with?
Never have I ever written a phrase out, ever. Never done it. I write technical stuff down, definitely, but never a phrase. It wouldn't sound right coming out of my mouth. It wouldn't be natural, I, no, I never do. But I definitely write technical stuff down, like what the splits need to be, where the best strokes are, Marshawn's best stroke, Carson Foster's best stroke, or whatever, I'll talk about technical stuff that I write down and I make sure that I have down. But never the jingoistic stuff, I wouldn't know what to write down because it has to be a surprise. Like I don't even remember that 44 flat, to tell you the truth. And I don't remember saying that. I must have felt at the time like, is the clock wrong? Like, and because that's what I don't remember it, to tell you the truth, Kyle. I don't remember saying that. I remember the race, obviously, but I don't remember the 100 split. So I know I must have been just as surprised as everybody else and thinking in my mind, maybe the clock's wrong,
I think that's what made it perfect. I think that's what made it perfect. Was I was watching it too. I think that is I think that's a perfect call.
It makes it better for me. Like I said, I want to pretend like I'm talking to somebody next to me. And when you're talking to somebody next to you, you're not looking for a phrase that you want to tell them, and so it just wouldn't be right. No, I've never done that. Dan has never done that. All the people that I've worked with that have taught me so much have never done it. So I'm not about to start. It's too late for that now anyway.
I tried it once. I tried to write down a phrase and work it in. And then by the end of the session, I couldn't find a spot for it. And I realized that it was kind of detracting from my ability to just call the meet. And so, I don't think I'll ever do it again. But I do think that 44.0 call, especially at that moment, crazy. was pretty
44.0, really?
44.0. He was 21. What was it? 21.2, 22.8, I think was the splits.
That is just insane. Now that I kind of think back about it, think about a guy going 100 back or 100 fly in 44 flat. It's just, wow, I didn't know that.
And then
I don't remember that, obviously.
Yeah, I'll send you the link to the video. I think it's out there on YouTube. But and to do that, and I think part of what kind of might have made you just like not really understand if that was right or not is the fact that he hit another 100 after that. So you see somebody go 43 in the 100 back like Luca did. I think it was 2 years ago now, and you're like, wow, but it's over, right? You're like, he's done. But
that's right. He did it leading off the relay for Georgia, I think.
Yeah, it was a sneaky NCAA record. Yeah. It was like, I think it was 43.3. Yeah. And right. it kind of got swept under the rug because it was in like lane 8 or lane 1.
Yeah.
And it was funny. One of the moments where I realized that what I was actually doing on like Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now might actually start having an impact was I tweeted that screenshot. And one of the kids that was swimming in that race that I screenshotted it for replied to it and was like, "Ooh, this is a tough look. I'm still at the flags," or something like that. It was
Everybody was though, so he shouldn't feel alone.
100%. Yeah, I think he was just messing around a little bit. But what Leon's done, and what Kate did, especially last year, I think NCAA swimming is in a really cool spot. And you said you've called, how many is it? 34 or 36?
36 men, 33 women.
Wow. So you've seen NCAA swimming for longer than most people, and you've gotten to be kind of in, I don't want to call it the driver's seat, but you've had a front row seat to, some of the behind the scenes conversations, production. You've seen production evolve. You've seen kind of the growth of social media. And I was watching, and I just put out a tweet about Deion Sanders and Colorado and what they've done. And they were the
I saw
most
that.
watched NCAA football game last weekend on Saturday. And it was a number 22 team versus an unranked Nebraska that was 0-1. And it was kind of like this. Is there something here that swimmers and coaches or anybody involved in NCAA swimming can look at and not necessarily replicate? I think I probably could have phrased it a little bit better because we don't have a Deion Sanders. I don't think there's ever really been one. I think that's why everyone's like, what's going on here? Like, we got to attach ourselves to this. 8.7 million viewers, on a number 22 versus an unranked team is unheard of. What is something that you think the number one thing, number two thing, as many things as you want to go into, that could help take swimming, to the point where I have this like dream where I can log on to ESPN and have 5 or 6, 7 or 8, 9 or 10, whatever dual meets. And they're all really well produced. They all have commentary. They have 2 camera angles. They have the graphics package that we see at World Championships. What is missing, or what can we do better?
Well, we've talked about this so many times over the last 40 years. I've been to every NC2A since 1978. So I've seen a lot of changes, obviously, from 6 swimmers in a final to 8, where we swam, 2 empty lane, 2 empty lane, and adding the 200 relays is another thing. We've made changes that have made the sport more exciting, no question about it. I think there's a few things that always pop off, and some of them I think you've already talked about on the stuff that I follow you on X. I think you just tweeted this the other day about having some sort of in-season tournament or something. I think that something like that would be cool. I think having short course meters really helped a lot, at least in those Olympic years. We did that back in 2000, had it short course meters, and it was awesome. We had the world records broken. People love to see world records. A lot of athletes or a lot of people can't relate to yards, believe it or not. We can as swimmers, obviously, but the general public is who you need to build the audience with. They can't relate to yards, Even the NCAAs are done in a 100-meter dash, So, and I get the reasoning why. A lot of schools don't have 25-meter pools, et cetera, et cetera. I get the reasonings why, but that I'm just telling you, that's one thing, something that I thought would be really cool. The most exciting moments in college athletics are the tournament in basketball, right? You mentioned the in-season tournament. Wouldn't it be cool to do a way to do that with swimming? Again, dude, maybe not in my lifetime. I don't have much longer to go, and I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But wouldn't it be cool to do something like that in the sport of swimming and start in, or at least non-Olympic years? It'd be tough to do it in an Olympic year because you'd have to come down so many different times. But have some sort of tournament where you start off with 32 teams. I mean, not 64, but start off with 32 teams and dwindle it and do like a 1 to 32. I think you've talked about something like that before. So, and then the other thing is that I think they've been talking about this as well, is we have to get away from college basketball. I don't know how that's possible. March is really the best time of year to do it. I know they've been talking about doing it in April. That makes it really tough.
Yeah.
Because I think that gets away from the priority for me. And I know it's not the priority for most swimmers, but the priority for me as a fan is the Olympic Games and long course meters. Nobody's going to remember how you did it, whether you got 3rd or 4th at NCAA's your junior year, and they're going to remember you for forever if you make an Olympic team. But backing it up to February or something like that, just to get out of the tournaments. I line would be something to think about. But you know, these things have been talked about before. I mean, doing live every night. I mean, which we do, online, but we don't do live every night on the bid network. Uh, it's a tough sell, man. It's a tough sell.
Yeah, it is. And the most of the pushback that I always get when I put something like that out there is, swimming doesn't have the market for it. There's not a market for it. People won't be interested. And until recently, I probably wouldn't have had as much ammunition to push back with. But I always like to bring up the UT versus NC State dual meet now, where I kind of agreed with people until that happened, because it wasn't even the fact that they got people there. It was the way that they acted when they were there. It felt like, and I've been to, big NCAA volleyball games. Volleyball's huge. Texas volleyball games are loud. They pack it in. It's awesome. Obviously, Nebraska just put 92,000 people at a volleyball game, which is still insane. I don't think I've wrapped my mind around it yet, but the way that they acted when they were there, they were involved, they were interested, they had the score up on the board in the back, they had graphics, they had everything going. It felt like proof of what I've thought for a long time, in that swimming could do it. We have NCAA swimming. It's exciting. The NCAAs are, I think they have the capability of being huge. But then once you graduate, it's kind of like and every professional or, post-collegiate swimmer that is lucky enough to be good enough to swim post-collegiately has kind of had this same thought of, I just wish there was something that I could do post-collegiate that felt like NCAA swimming. And so we've had the ISL. You commentated for the ISL. And it was something that I never really got to like dig my teeth into. And really, I think I just kind of like missed it. I think I was probably like working a full-time job doing this or that. And it just like kind of slipped off. But do you think that swimming has the capability of having a full-time professional league?
I'd love to believe that could be a possibility. A lot of money, and there was obviously some criticism on a lot of money, what that meant, but a lot of money was thrown out at the ISL, and it never really took off. I thought the ISL, and I still think to this day, is a great idea. I love the format. I love the excitement, the bells and whistles they came up with to make the sport more exciting. I love that. I think the team atmosphere was awesome. I do think a professional league would work. And this is just me talking. I don't know crap.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
I don't know I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm obsessed with the Ryder Cup. I love the Ryder Cup, and the ratings are through the roof. Nobody gets paid. They do it for their country. It's us versus them. I think where the ISL was lacking, not necessarily lacking, but didn't have time to build yet, was the vested interest in the team. Well, if you're the New York Breakers and you never swim a meet in New York, how are you going to build that interest for the New York Breakers? You got to swim in New York. So I think a professional league would work, and you'd probably get a lot of. First of all, it's going to take money. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. You're going to have somebody that's really wealthy, like we had with the ISL, that loved swimming, that had the money to be able to kind of burn for 2 or 3 years in order to end up, trying to make a profit. But it would be a league of countries or regions. It would be U.S. might have 2 teams. Australia might have 1 or 2. You'd have maybe an Asian team, a European team, South American team, whatever. But something like that where it's us against them. Dude, did you see, and I'll just give you an example. Did you see I think I posted the thing with Kate Campbell and what she said. Mm-hmm. That was through the roof as far as number of times people, I don't pay attention to that stuff, but my daughter told me about it, who helps me with my Instagram and stuff. She said, Dad, That one thing posted more than you posted anything else ever. And it was because she was talking smack about the United States, right? Which is great, which is what we
Hmm.
need. So we need those personality. We need, we need those Kate Campbells. We need the Deion Sanders. You've got to gain interest by having great personalities. The Michael versus Ryan was, everybody loved Ryan or loved Michael. You know, everybody was pulling for one or the other. Ryan, love or hate him, he had an amazing personality,
Hmm.
um, which really shined through television. People loved that. And I think that's what you're going to need. You're going to need, you know, I think it was during the ISL, which got people talking, dude, was, I can't remember who it was
It was the
either, but
Ryan and Coleman.
yes,
Hmm.
yeah, it was right. It was really nothing, you know. It was just two guys kind of going at it for a little while, and everybody. Didn't last long, but tell me the truth, man. It got people talking. It got people tuning in the next time
It
because
did.
they showed us the ratings that the day after that, you know, TIFF happened, and it was like doubled. So I don't know if you'll ever get that. I don't know if you're going to have that, but that would be a key to. There are a lot of keys, but the key, you know, you'd have to have great personalities.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to intentionally put yourself out there.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's
It
easier
is
said than done for sure, but
much.
at
I
the same
agree
time,
totally.
I would also argue that we have the personalities. One
Yeah,
thing that I think happens is, and I love the sportsmanship in swimming. I think sometimes we dive into being over the top sportsmanly, right? And a part of that kind of results in us suppressing how we actually feel, which is a fan. I know exactly what you're talking about. Ryan called Coleman, you know, a thinkingly private, which I guarantee you Ryan would be like, yeah, it's kind of stupid to ever think that you'd be private when you're finishing a race, especially because that's when you're on camera. And you got like a little bit of a lip reading off of him. And that's just how I was feeling. And I mean,
yeah,
I'm drinking my coffee out of an Austin Sports and Social Championship mug from a
yeah.
intramural volleyball league where I would get riled up. I would talk to the ref. We would talk back and forth between teams, and this is literally the prize was a mug, like a pint glass. And when you think about the team atmosphere and that sort of thing, I talk about the UFC a lot because I know the UFC really well, and I know kind of the way that they operate. If you watch these guys sell a fight and then afterwards they might not love each other, I don't think you have to, but at the same time they know what's going into it. When you talk about the ratings being bigger, double the next day or whatever, I think something that we miss a lot is if athletes were just themselves, not only, and this is just me talking, this is what we do, is if athletes were just themselves, it wouldn't only benefit the ratings. I think it would benefit athletes as well. Being able to just sit there and say exactly what's in your head. And it's kind of, once again, easier said than done. The commentary, I feel like, is a similar thing in that over time, you kind of learn people don't want to hear you be a personality. People don't want to hear you sit there and say what you expect people to want them to say. If you stand there in an interview and say what you're feeling, all of a sudden everyone's like, huh, that felt real. And we want to believe that fans and people at home aren't super intuitive and can tell when you're, just kind of doing it for the camera. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we have the personalities. We just need to kind of like break them out of their shells because
Yeah, yeah.
ooh, that
Well, like
watching
Lily
the
King. Lily King is a good example of
yeah.
an. I just love her. I mean, it's the one I never want to miss Lily King swim because I want to watch her before and after. You know, and I love what comes out of her mouth. I think she's so great for swimming. I've talked about how I feel about what she's been able to do for the sport, and but she's a great personality, you know, and she's not afraid to speak what's on her mind, I mean, we were all over that in Rio, you know, with this, you know, and it was a seminal moment of those Olympic Games, and I wish we had a lot more Lily Kings. I mean, you know, I wish we had a lot more Ryan Murphy's, who's all class and nothing but a gentleman, and who will go down as one of the greatest in history, obviously, both in and out of the pool, great leader. Uh, but they don't all have to be Ryan Murphys. They can also be a little Logan Paulish, you know.
Yeah, and
Uh,
and that's the
you
thing is,
know,
you need both sides, right?
yeah, yeah,
If you have just a ton of one personality that is like explosive and annoying, and you think you need to be like this, and people will know, and
yeah.
sometimes people don't really care if they know,
Right,
that
right.
you're kind of like building it up and it's not really like completely genuine. You're not the guy or the girl that wants to get in there and finger wag and stuff like that. People can be intuitive and realize it, but they also don't really care, because then they're like, all right, I'm into it, I'm going to buy into you, versus the buttoned up personality. I think having both of those is definitely important, and the UFC does a ridiculously good job of that. Granted, I know,
Yeah.
and all the people on Twitter, I know that they are not directly parallel in promotion, UFC and swimming. I understand that, but let's talk briefly, and I don't want to keep you on here for too long, about just advancement in swimming. I had one question written down here that I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on, as someone that gets to watch it and is around it and on the pool deck. What advancement or one thing do you wish that you, or do you think would have had the biggest impact on your performance in the water
Mm,
back in the day that is now available? What one
standard.
thing?
Well, obviously it's the suit itself. I think from a technical standpoint, but for me, it would have been money. I didn't swim for money because I didn't make any money. We weren't allowed to accept money when I swam. We had the NCAA type rules where, even after you graduated, you were not allowed to accept money. So I think money would have at least been able to provide some sort of semblance of living, and then I might have been able to swim into my late 20s anyway. I was 25 when I swam in '84, but I had to move on because I just didn't have the wherewithal financially to survive. But I think money has certainly changed the sport more dramatically than anything else, Kyle, because when I won in '84, I was the third oldest swimmer in history to win a gold medal. I was 25, so now that's just like an average age, of a team. Uh, so you can certainly earn a living making swimming at a high level. Uh, um, but the suit, from a technical standpoint, uh, the I think that's about it. We had the type of pools that were fast. We understood fast pools back then. Uh, I was the first swimmer ever to do the track start, so that was just something that was kind of in infant stages, when I did it in '84. But so that has become much more of a weapon. But the suit definitely, I swam in a little lycra speedo, brief. So that's definitely changed, in a big way, obviously.
Do you think NCAA teams should be suiting up for dual meets?
Well, in a perfect world, yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of them have to just to make cuts nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's like the NBA rule, man, that just came out. I don't know if you saw that just yesterday, where they're going to fine teams for sitting their best players during
Huh.
an NBA regular season game, and not just talking about little money. The first fine is 100,000. The second is 250,000, and after that, it's 1 million plus every time you sit your best player um, on at road games. So if you expect an audience, the similarity to swimming is, if you expect an audience to come in and watch great swimming, not just a great dual meet, but great swimming, fast swimming, then you're going to have your best swimmers suit up. I don't think it. I don't think it hurts things. I mean, suited up. I suited at every single dual meet. I never wore a nylon suit. I always put my lycra on, my fast swimsuit on, because I like swimming fast. I don't understand the whole dynamic behind not suiting up for dual meets. I know there's reasons for it, but I don't understand them. What's the big deal by swimming fast when you're tired in a suit? It's not going to affect your training or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, yeah, I think they should all suit up, but again, I don't know anything.
I think you know more than not anything. But in a perfect world, I agree with you. If finances are taken out of it, because finances are a thing in all Olympic sports, I think track is kind of widening the gap between swimming and track in terms of audience and exposure and growth and personalities and
Hmm.
that sort of thing. I am 100% in agreement with you that if you're not going to suit up, you can't expect an audience, and if you're not going to suit up, I think there's a rift that should be there between you're allowed to complain about not making money in swimming as long as you're exhausting all of the opportunities to be
Right,
exciting.
right.
Other than that, unless I just don't have sympathy for you. I don't have
Especially
sympathy.
now,
Yeah. Hmm.
especially now at the collegiate level where you can make money with the
Yeah.
NIL.
And
What
and
gets
with
you
all
about
of
not
the
making
all
money
of the
if
social
you're
media
not willing to
tools.
step up?
Yeah, you have every opportunity at, literally the tip of your fingers to be able to promote yourself, promote your team, and obviously like do it within reason, within what your team is
Right.
about, and be exciting. Don't be annoying. Probably. I mean, if you want to be annoying, go for it. Whatever. But yeah, I think if you don't want to suit up, don't suit up. But I also think if you don't want to suit up and another team suits up because they want to bring in viewers, if an ASU wants to suit up, throw Leon in a suit and be like, hey, see if you can go 329 in our pool. And if you want to build that up and build up the story around that or something like that, I don't think you're allowed to be upset. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect world. I think everybody suits up, everybody goes fast all the time because we're the only sport, and we are fighting a much more draggy, if you will, substance in water. Track doesn't necessarily have suits that are going to burn out and wear out. They have
Mm.
shoes, but you know, I don't know. It's a really tough one to solve, but I do think it would make things a lot more exciting because as a swimming fan, and I think one of my theses or whatever the plural of thesis is we need swimming fans to stick around first. We can grow the sport after that, but right now when people graduate, and it's a hard sport to keep up with. Swim Swam does a great job, I always say, kind of helping people stay in touch with the sport without having to do their own research. You can just read an article, read headlines if you want to instead, just to stay up with it. If swimming fans are going to graduate from the sport, we'll call it graduate, and not want to stay in touch with it, we got to figure out how to keep them involved so they can tell a friend. And the best way to keep a swimming or a former swimmer involved and interested is for them to look at a meet and see that suit that goes down almost to the knee and up to the hip and go, something cool could happen here. Someone at this meet could swim fast because they're suited up, because you're right, they make a difference. So I'm glad to hear that Rowdy Gaines is on the team suit up, because why not train?
I don't understand that mentality. Maybe during the Olympic year, you want to, even during the Olympic year, I don't see, I mean, you can still train your butt off and, work your butt off and not be rested. But it's weird to be able to explain to somebody next to you, again, that nobody that knows nothing about swimming. Well, what did Leon go at NCAA's in the?
uh
Let's just say, for example, in the 400 IM.
yeah, 328.
So he goes 328 in NCAA's. Well, in this dual meet against Cal, or if Cal's a bad example, against whoever, let's say USC. They don't have a great men's team. So against USC, he wears this drag suit and he goes 345. The guy next to me is going, well, he won't go that slow, but let's say he goes 340, whatever. I'm making up numbers. How's he 10 seconds away from his best time? I mean, how does that work? I mean, come on. He's 10 seconds away. This is boring.
Hmm.
It'd be cool for him to go, yeah, 331. And kind of see how good he is, man. And this is
Yeah.
the middle of the season. How you explain it? And then you have to explain, well, he's got a drag suit on. This is not a big deal. Well, it's not a big deal to him. Then why would it be a big deal to me?
Yeah, hit the nail on the head right there. It's swimming is a difficult sport to explain to someone that doesn't understand it as
Yeah.
it is. I think we need to peel back as many layers as possible to make it as entry level as possible, right? At that
Yeah.
NC State Texas dual meet, everyone's trying to go fast.
Was everybody
First, second,
suited
third,
up?
everyone was suited up. It was, I mean, it was what it is. You take that away. There's not because to a casual fan, we'll call him a casual fan, especially at the NCAA level, because casual fans do show up. Student athletes show up. Not every student, or not students, not student athletes. Not every student's going to be able to go to a Texas football game. They pack out that arena no matter what. They might end up going to a swim meet. And if they go into a swim meet and they, see this thing going on and they're like, now I'm confused. Now I feel like I don't belong here. Now I feel like, things are going over my head. I'm not interested. I'm not going to come back. If you peel back that one layer and you get to listen to people be loud and you get to listen to people be quiet, you start to get a lot more in tune with what's going on. And, everybody wants to be smart about something. It's kind of like everyone wants to tell you that they discovered an artist before that they were big, Oh, swim meets are cool. Like, trust me, come to a swim meet with me. And then all of a sudden you get to be the expert in the house. And I think swimming in and of itself is confusing. It is. Track, you run. That's it. 100 meters. All you're doing is running 100 meters. If someone steps out of a lane and they get DQ'd, very easy explanation. In swimming, we have 4 different strokes. Sometimes we do them all back to back to back. Sometimes we don't. Various distances. I think we need to try to, get rid of as many layers as possible that could make, someone just feel like they don't belong, in fandom, if you will.
You're right. That's a good point, dude. Good point, buddy.
Yeah, but I'll let you go. I think this is hopefully not the last time that we get to have a conversation, for people that are, interested in listening to these conversations. I think, this is hopefully one step towards, getting people to stay interested in swimming, outside of every 4 years. And I'd love to have you on 1, 2, 3, 5, 20, 100 more times. But great to get to talk to you about specifically commentary. I'm going to take a lot of those, little tidbits that you threw my way, and I'm going to relentlessly ping you until you send me your vocabulary sheet so I can use it in my next commentary roles.
I'll email it to you today. I don't mind. You'll look at it and think, it's kind of weird. But then if I send it to some Joe Schmo, they're going to go, what in the world? But you'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, especially knowing, how many times can you call one race like over and over and over and over again and not come up with new things, even new technical things to talk about. So I'll send it to you for sure. But before you go, I wanted to say, again, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Keep up the good fight. And I know a lot of people out there appreciate what you're doing for the sport. And you're going to make it far, buddy. Hang in there. Have patience.
I hope so. We're working on it. The patience thing can be a little bit difficult at times,
I know.
With the end goal of getting to sit next to Rowdy Gaines in a booth and call at least one race, we'll make it happen. I think there's a lot of people out there that are hoping it'll happen. We'll work
up
on
to
it.
if you're, I don't think we go to Austin this year. Where do you live?
I'm in Austin. Yeah.
So I don't think we're coming to Austin this year, but no, the Pro Swim, it's not in there in Austin, right? Knoxville. It's only like 2 or 3 of them. But anytime you are somewhere and you want to come up and call a race with me, no problem. We'll
figure it out. I love it. Well, thanks again for coming on. We'll get you back on here again soon. 2, 3, 5, 100 times. Thanks for listening, y'all. This was my first conversation on the internet with Rowdy Gaines.